Hi, I'm Matthew Levack. I'm a character artist working in the animation and gaming industry. I have over 7 years of experience working for companies such as Triggerfish Animation Studios, Ballisti, many great clients. This video, we're going to be touching on topics in modeling, general tips and techniques that'll help you get going on your journey, where to start, what software to use. It's aimed at people who know a little bit about modeling but want to get into more intermediate and advanced levels, try and get that first shot into the industry. So in the beginning of your modeling journey, you're probably going to ask yourself, what softwares and equipment do I need to be able to do the modeling? I would suggest Maya or Blender to get you going. They are really great softwares that have a lot of amazing tools that will get you going in your first couple of projects. You can also check out ZBrush, which is a program that I use a ton, pretty much every day. And it is a super intuitive program that lets you sculpt digital clay as if you were working in the real medium. So when you load into your program of choice, what shortcuts do I need to know? How do I navigate this program? And where is everything in this program? It's a good idea to give yourself some time to get comfortable in the program, navigating around the workspace and finding all of the tools that you are going to use. A lot of programs will often group the different disciplines in the shelf so that it's easier to find. That's to say the animation tools will all be together and the rigging tools will all live together and so on. So once you're comfortable in your program or software of choice, you might be asking yourself, what should my first model even be? You might have seen something really cool on ArtStation or Instagram, something very complex. But I would suggest for your first model, something simple, something that'll help you get to understand the fundamentals of modeling before you move on to more complex tasks. What does the process look like from start to finish when opening up your software and getting your first concept art? What does it look like to move a model from the beginning all the way to the end stage? You want to start, before even modeling, looking at your concept art. It's very important to understand and analyze what the concept artist has given you or the concept art that you found online, so that you can really understand how this thing is constructed in 3D space. It's a good idea to spend a lot of time really understanding the construction of the thing that you're trying to model. That's to say, what are the primary forms, the bigger shapes that make up the model that you're trying to recreate? You also are going to look at things like the silhouette and where certain planes break and how complex the model is. It's very easy to get trapped on Pinterest or Instagram or ArtStation, scrolling forever, not knowing what you're looking for. So you really want to understand what makes a reference useful. For me, I tend to go quite granular when putting together a reference board, which is a collection of images that I'll have next to my work that I can keep looking back and forth as I'm modeling. References are really good as well as a way to benchmark what your model is looking like, especially if you're going for a specific style. Blocking or refinement or polishing, and you might want to know what that really means in terms of modeling. For blocking, you are building the structure, the base, the skeleton of the thing that you're trying to model. So again, you're looking at the bigger shapes, the primary forms that make the silhouette of whatever it is you're trying to model? Is it cylindrical? Is it more box-shaped? Is it more spherical? These are things that you use to block out your model. When you move into the second stage, which is refinement, you're asking a similar question, but on a second level, sort of. Your secondary forms sit on top of your primary forms without competing with the main idea that you did in the beginning. After that, you can go onto your tertiary forms or your polishing stage, which would be adding small skin details, wrinkles, pores, small things that don't change the overall silhouette or compete with the primary or secondary forms, but really help bring believability and depth to your model. So remember, spend most of your time blocking because that's your foundation. Refinement helps add complexity, and the polish stage is kind of where you get to have fun and add all the nice little details that make it look good. You might have heard of a term called retopology, and you might also ask yourself the question, do I need to know how to do this? Do I need to retopologize my model? The short answer is yes, especially in animation and gaming, since these models that you're doing are either going to be animated and deform, or will need to run in an optimal engine. You could do a procedural method of retopologizing, which is very quick, but you don't have as much control. Or you could do a manual method of retopology where you have the most amount of control, but it takes a lot of time. Retopologize your models. I think you do need to do your own UVs, as it makes you a better teammate, as well as making yourself a better artist. You'll find that other departments would really appreciate you doing the UVs for them, as it speeds up their workflow as well. So when you're starting out as a modeler on your journey, you need to take a look at your learning process and ask yourself, how am I going to get better as a modeler? A lot of the times, it can be quite overwhelming and frustrating to do a project that you have in your head, and you think it's going to look great, and it comes out and it doesn't look like how you imagined. So there are a few strategies to become a better modeler. Following tutorials is a really good idea. You want to make sure that you can understand the process from the beginning all the way to the end. Once you understand that process, stop watching the tutorial and try and do it on your own. If you need to go back to check on the tutorial again, that's totally fine. Just give yourself enough time to become comfortable with the fundamentals of modeling. Learning is also experimenting. So try out all the different tools that you can get your hands on and try and discover new ways of approaching modeling. You also want to find people and mentors to give you critical feedback. You want to really seek feedback from people, because as a modeler, it's easy to get blinded by your work. You're working on it so much. You're spending all these hours working on it. You start to let things fall through the cracks, and having someone with a trained eye, a real professional, look at your work, give you honest feedback is probably the fastest way that you can upskill yourself. So in a production setting, there are going to be technical requirements for the model that it needs to pass. What are those technical requirements? There are quite a few, and what you want to do as an artist is check in with the departments that are coming ahead of you as to the specific needs of the model. There are a few basic good practices and habits, such as making sure that your mesh doesn't have history, freezing your transformations, putting the pivot onto the origin, things like that. Really basic sort of house cleaning, I would call it, before you publish your model. So another nice tool that I use a lot is a mesh checker. So you can go online, you can find a bunch of mesh checkers out there, and what they do is make sure that there aren't any double-sided faces on your model or weird five-sided faces that would definitely cause problems down the line if you weren't to check for those. So make sure to check your models. So as you go further into the technical requirements of a model, you might come across a term of edge flow. What is edge flow? What does it mean? How does it affect you? Edge flow is really important for models, especially when you're going to deform them or animate them. Edge flow determines how the mesh wraps around the shape that you're trying to make. It can be quite tricky to understand at first, but once that thinking clicks, you could imagine it almost as a river or something flowing through the character that you can see. Is the mesh and the quads on your model evenly distributed? So it's important, again, for deformations and overall appearance of the model, as sometimes edges that are too close to each other can cause pinching or weird visual artifacts on the mesh. So just remember, when you're checking your model, try to get as close to a square grid as possible. You want to avoid diamond shapes or anything too funky looking. So when you're getting into the later stages of modeling and you're subdividing your model, you might run into an issue of a deformed mesh or something that looks a bit mangled. You might ask yourself, like, why is this happening? What can I check on my model to make sure that it's going to have a clean, smooth surface? When a mesh is really deformed, you want to check for any stray vertices or faces even that aren't following the surface that you're trying to recreate. Let's say, for instance, you're trying to create a smooth spherical object and there's a vertice far off to the side or deep down inside the mesh. This is going to cause really weird deformations and for your mesh to look quite bad. When you get into a professional setting and you're working as a modeler in the industry, you'll find that the modeling department is split up into teams. Not one modeler could model every single thing that you see in the film. So the teams are split up into character modeling, prop modeling, and set modeling. The character modelers handle the main characters, the side characters, and the background characters. They also are responsible for modeling all of the props, like a sword or a staff that might be on the character. This is different to the prop modeling team, which would take care of things like glasses, tables, chairs, houses, the smaller props that you see in the scene. And then the set modelers are the team that are responsible for creating the world. They handle the buildings and the layout of the cities and the organic things like the trees and rocks and landscapes. They really set the scale for the project. In a professional setting, you'll be getting a lot of feedback, and it's really important to take notes when you're in these meetings and prioritize the notes that you need to get to. You want to remain as positive as possible, especially if you get some feedback that might seem a bit negative. This often isn't the case, and it often isn't a personal attack. Rather, everyone is trying to make the best possible outcome for the production. So remember, take notes, prioritize those notes, remain positive, and everyone's input counts. When you get into the later stages of modeling, as you're finishing up your model, you might ask yourself if it's important to know how to rig a character or how to texture a character. Does this matter if you're only going to be in the modeling department? And I would say that it makes you a much better teammate to work with if you know a little bit about rigging and texturing, as you'll work into your model the things that those artists need. If you have a better understanding of how a rigger approaches their work, you will make certain decisions on your model. This also applies for texturing. So it's very important to have a broad understanding of the different departments that are going to touch the model. On the questions of portfolios, I get asked this a bunch. It's very important to tailor your portfolios, not only in a sense of including the most impactful and best looking stuff, but tailoring it to studios' styles and brands. You want to make sure that you're targeting the studios that are hiring with work that they will be doing and want to see you doing. You want to make sure that you include things that you enjoy, things that excite you, but also when asking yourself what to choose to model and what to choose to put on your portfolio, you need to find things that challenge you and push you to learn new workflows, will help show a great understanding of the entire process and overall make you a desirable hire. When trying to figure out how to specialize, this can take quite a while. Once you understand the fundamentals and the processes of each sub-discipline in modeling, you'll find yourself leaning towards one or more disciplines. I myself started modeling props, and later, when I found ZBrush, fell in love with the process of creating characters. It's very important to understand the effort that it takes and the energy and the time that it takes to move a model from the beginning all the way to the end. So it's super important to enjoy the process and not just the finished product. When you're looking at your portfolio and trying to decide on the next piece that you're going to model, you're going to ask yourself, like, there's so many concepts out there. What do I need to think about when choosing a piece to model for my portfolio? You want things that are going to excite you, things that you're comfortable with doing, but also parts of the model, or parts of the concept rather, that are going to push you and challenge you in new ways to learn new tools and new workflows. So we've gone over tips and techniques to get you started on your modeling journey. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any other questions that you'd like me to answer, leave them down in the comments below.